Hi, everybody. It is good to be back. My name is Hayley Nixon, and we are going to be joining Shona Hendricks from Coach Parry. So today we are discussing what's often seen as quite a taboo subject, and that is, does your menstrual cycle or your period change the way you train? And it's not something that's discussed often, and we're really excited to get down into some content about this subject. It's really, really important for our female athletes. So do enjoy the conversation with us today. Please make sure you subscribe, and you'll receive notifications of when we release our next video. And of course, we always welcome any comments or suggestions on what else you'd like us to discuss. So Shona, the next question we really wanted to get into today was whether your menstrual cycle and your period does actually change the way you should train or you do train. What are the thoughts at the moment on this?
So it's interesting. You're coming from my sports science background. It's the jury's really out on it. A lot of the research that is out there says that perhaps the female's menstrual cycle might change more specifically for an endurance athlete, as opposed to necessarily that effect might be more on an endurance athlete as opposed to a strength athlete. But a lot of the research that's currently being done, perhaps I think we've mentioned this before in previous videos. It's problematic with some of the research, and it's just not being done properly. And so I think the reliability of that research is in question. But we see it all the time with our athletes that yes, the menstrual cycle does affect their training. I mean, personally, for my own training and with the athletes that we work with, you would have seen it as well. That there are just days where you are down and struggling. You're struggling with motivation or energy levels, and so it does affect the way you train. And so I think that's why it's really, really important to just kind of avoid this blanket approach, to your training, or copying a cut and paste kind of program, and just really being a bit more specific around what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And I just think what makes it complicated, like we've said before, is it's just so individual specific. So you think you're getting it right, that you're starting to work out as a coach how you should be training your female athletes, but then there's always an anomaly, or one of your athletes has no sort of symptoms of their period, doesn't notice it, it comes and goes easily, whereas your other one, as you say, has got such emotional drops and lows, or has so much pain from the discomfort that really hinders them. And I remember as a young athlete being warned by my coach, like, I don't want to hear that you're having your period on race day, so make sure you do something about skipping that. And it's things like that where there's just so much misinformation. So it's quite hard to manage individuals unless they're willing to talk about it and be open about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're touching on so many points. It's one, breaking that tabooness, so which we spoke about in previous video, but so as coaches, having that relationship with your athletes so that you can understand where that athlete's at, but exactly making that an individualized sort of concept or plan for that athlete. We work quite generically, I think, in general principles of coaching, and building up and recovering, and it just makes sense then that we should be doing that specifically for female athletes. I mean, your female athlete cycle from person to person is going to differ anywhere from 21 to 35 days. And within that, then there's going to be different symptoms experienced, different effects physiologically, and that is definitely going to have an effect on your training. I think whether you're just a runner or if you're a runner doing strength training, you really want to make sure that you're timing those things properly to optimize everything that you're doing. I think one thing we must maybe also remember is even within those athletes where, if people are working on a 21-day cycle, different females are on different forms of contraception. And I'm sure we'll cover those topics in later videos as well. But yeah, it really just calls for an individualized approach, because it definitely does affect the way we train.
And are we right in seeing that research does like to talk about the phases of your menstrual cycle possibly benefiting different ways of training? I know there are apps, there's lots of apps out there where you can track your cycle, you can track the phase you're in, and if you're in luteal phase, you do X, Y, and Z. And I mean, I would like to think that there is merit in that, but again, unless you are the athlete and the coach who are trying a system and putting it into place for 3 to 6 months, you could just be copy and pasting, like you said before, and it may not actually be having a difference.
Yeah, you're spot on, Hales. I mean, the research, that's exactly right. So it's talking around 2 phases, your follicular phase and your luteal phase. And for the most part, the research refers to the start of a cycle as the first day of menses, which or of bleeding. And so that's important. But a lot of what the research and where we see the mistakes coming in is the way they measure those different cycles. You can measure it via blood, you can measure it via temperature. And a lot of the research methodologies are using different ways to do that for the same kind of study. And again, you would have to do the same measure every day at the same time of day, because that's the way the body works. It's quite methodical like that. And so, yeah, I think the research it's moving towards a place where it is getting a bit more reliable, but it's challenging research to do, and it probably costs a lot of money, and so it's not being done or it hasn't been done extensively. And so, but yes, I think there is merit in understanding how your body is responding to those different phases. And yeah, really monitoring a lot of that in terms of how you as an athlete are responding, or if you're a coach, monitoring how your athletes are responding to different phases. And so then you would perhaps start moving some of your higher intensity sessions, to a later phase where you perhaps have a little bit more energy. And, something we'll discuss a little bit later on is a little bit around nutrition and how that affects those different phases as well. And I think that's once you as an athlete can start monitoring yourself and picking up your own trends, you can start putting things in place to sort of combat those side effects and optimize your training.
And I guess, as we've discussed in videos before, that becomes like the pivotal difference between male and females is like, it's just more complex, and nutrition, the way we're fueling, the way we're training, the way we recover is so based on our hormones, on our menstrual cycle, which is something our male counterparts don't have to deal with. Which is what separates us. So we should be empowered, as you say, to try and get this information and make the best of it. Certainly if we're going to get the best results from us as females and from our athletes.
Yeah, exactly. It's so different to the male physiology. And then again, just trying to avoid a blanket approach. So it's an individual approach for each individual female as well. So it's it's one big dynamic bringing down into many other smaller dynamics, and exactly that, empowering the female athlete to figure out her own physiology and the way she responds to that, I think is where the magic happens there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think really just, in answer to our original question is that, yes, we believe that it does change the way we train. It does change the way we possibly react to training stimulus. But our quest really is still to try and make it as individual as possible, to not have a blanket approach to every female, just because they're different to a male.
Yep, exactly. That's spot on. Thanks, Hayley.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. It's awesome to have these conversations. And of course, if you've enjoyed listening to us, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to see our most popular video to date, as well as our latest video, please follow the prompts. And we look forward to seeing you next time.